There was a nurse, and I can't remember the title of the book, but she wrote a book, and basically she was taking care of people that were on their deathbeds. And one of the things that she did is she would be just talking to them and asking them about, what they loved about their life, what they regretted, and things like that. And she published a book on all the details of that. But it was really phenomenal because her whole life revolved around spending time with people that are basically at the end of their life. And hardly any of them regretted the things that they did. The vast majority of them regretted the things that they didn't do. That was one of the big things that really stood out. What is your biggest fear? What do you need to do in order to overcome that fear? And that fear, we can call them that fear monster, gets bigger and bigger the more and more afraid you are and the more you don't face it. But if you take one step closer every day, that fear monster becomes really, really small. And then another question to ponder about and think about is, whose support do you need? And what I mean by that is it could be a person, it could be a company, it could be resources, but you don't need to do everything yourself. I think we've been so accustomed, in school, trying to do everything ourselves that, when we collaborate in school, they call that cheating.
Hello and welcome to the Riyadi Club podcast, where entrepreneurs are the real heroes. On this podcast, we discuss tools, concepts, and ideas that are practical and inspirational for the entrepreneur. To learn more, go to www.riyadi.me. That's RIADI.me. Thank you, and I hope you find this episode helpful.
Hello listeners, this is Ruba Al-Tijani and welcome to Riyadi Club with Dawood Qaqish. The title of today's session is Land the Plane. This is part 7 of the 7 parts of your Big Dream season. Dawood, tell us a little bit more about this and why is it important for the listener?
Hello, Ruba, and hello, listeners. I want to start out by sharing a great quote by Mahmoud Darwish. I'll say it in English and then I'll say it in Arabic. And this quote really summarizes your Big Dream season. The quote is, "The earth will expand according to the size of your dreams," by Mahmoud Darwish. على قدر حلمك تتسع الأرض. What I like to talk about is I don't think we have an ambition problem. I don't think we have a we can't do it problem. I don't think we have a motivation problem. I actually think we have a lack of creative dreaming problem. As Ruba said, this is part 7 of Your Big Dream, and the title of the session is Landing Your Plane. And the analogy that I want to share with you as a listener is this. Imagine that you are flying from Dubai to London, and now you're about to land it in London. This is your destination. This is the last part of your Big Dream framework. And the key to your big dream is landing the plane. And so for today's session, we're going to share about how you can land your plane and arriving at your destination. Let me start out by sharing a story with the listener. So like 5 years ago or something like that, my wife got me a gift certificate to go and fly a plane. So I've always wanted to become a pilot when I was a kid. Thank God I didn't, because I don't pay attention to detail. But I went and I flew this plane with an instructor. And this is a small plane, not like the big plane or anything like that. So on my right, there was an instructor, and then I actually flew the plane. So I taxied the plane on the runway. I took off with the plane. I drove the plane. I drove it over the city of Chicago. I flew it. I didn't drive it. So, let me correct myself. So when you're taxiing, you're driving, and then you take off, and then you fly that. And then we flew it over the city, and then I flew it back. And so I was basically able to do everything. And to be fair, I've played some video games where I've flown some planes, so I probably had a little bit of experience without knowing it. But the interesting thing is the instructor would not allow me to land the plane. So he would let me do everything except landing the plane, because that's the hardest part. And that's the part that potentially, you could crash and things like that. So what was really fascinating is, and I share the story because in many ways it resembles my life, it resembles your life. It's pretty easy for us to come up with ideas. It's sometimes easy to take action and get going, but actually very few people land the plane when it counts. And if you don't land the plane, you've wasted everything else, right? So there's 7 parts to this framework. And if you've done the first 6, fantastic. But if you don't do part 7 of this framework, part 7 of 7, you've just wasted everything else. And so landing the plane is an important part of your big dream, your big ambition. And that's the analogy that I like to use. I guess, Ruba, I'm going to turn it over to you here in a minute. But the one thing I want to share with the listener We all have an image of a plane, like when we go and we fly international or, Dubai to London or something like that. The plane that I flew, my car is bigger than that plane. Like when I was flying the plane, my shoulder was hitting the instructor's shoulder next to me, so it's not like these big planes that people, it's really a small plane like a Cessna, for anybody who knows anything about planes. But again, me flying the plane, I thought it was fascinating. He would let me do everything except landing the plane. And when it came to landing the plane, he goes, all right, I'm taking over. And he landed the plane. And, obviously, I'm here. So we landed it safely and things like that. That's what I mean is that this is the same analogy. It's really for us to land the plane, the seventh part of the big dream. I want to recap the different parts and I want to dive right in. But Ruba, I want to come to you first.
Yeah, if anything goes wrong while you were flying, he could have taken over and he could have saved you and saved himself. But landing the plane, that's the part that takes most of the experience because you could just crash, right? So it's interesting that you were able to fly it from the first time. That's why I was laughing when you said that. I didn't know that the experience of the video games counts, I thought that was funny. Because, it's a plane, right? So I would expect this to be different.
Yeah, now to be fair, it's not like any regular video game. Microsoft had the Microsoft Flight Simulator.
Oh,
so
okay.
in a way, I was playing like a video game, like I was learning to fly,
I was simulating.
Yeah, but to be fair, 90% of the time I played the video game, I crashed the plane, so... So I want to recap all four parts of the Your Big Dream framework. So number one is set absurd expectations, right? We talked about that. Number two, we talked about exploring opportunities. Number three, we talked about clearing the path, get things out of your way, things that are obstacles, bottlenecks, get those. Number four, we talked about taking action, even if it's a small action every single day. Here's an easy formula for you. If you just do 1% improvement every single day, by the end of the year, the compound effect, you're 37 times better. You improve by that. So take action every single day. Number five, expect setbacks. If you've got a big dream, you've got this big ambition, you're not going to go right through it without having any setbacks or challenges or obstacles. Expect that. And that way, when you expect that, you can get around these obstacles much faster. And then sustained belief, right? You got to keep on going. You got to, when you're flying that plane from Dubai to London, everything is good, but then at some point you start doubting yourself. You're like, hang on, how much further before I arrive at London? And then number 7 is land the plane, right? So you can do 1 through 6, but if you don't land the plane, you don't get to your destination. And the analogy that I love to use here is, we have a vision of Disneyland. When you go through this exercise, it's kind of like Disneyland for your mind. You go to magical places by listening or reading to this, and it's really an amazing journey. So if you go through that and you go through it, it's really, really amazing. It's like visiting Disneyland for your mind is all I can say. It's phenomenal. I've gone through the exercise myself, and I came out with really a transformation, not just for my big dreams and my big ambitions, but I made a whole list of other silly dreams and silly ambitions. They might be silly to you, but they're really important for me. So anyways, I wanted to recap a little bit, and then we're gonna share some questions with you, and then we're gonna share a strategy. But before we do that, I guess, Ruba, I just want to come back to you. I know I kind of went through the different 7 frameworks really fast. Anything that you wanted to add to that, or maybe point out for the listener?
Yeah. What I really loved about this framework is that it is simple steps because it asks you simple questions, but they're really deep questions. And then the steps are progressive. So you realize that you're going from step 1 to step 2. It's accumulative kind of. So that was my intake on this, that it's a whole system. It's really easy to go through it, but it's also deep at the same time.
Yeah. And I got to say, believe it or not, my favorite one was set absurd expectations. I think if you think a little bit about, right now, we're obsessed with SMART goals, right? Specific, measurable, actionable, time-bound. I forget what SMART stands for, but that's what it is. And I'm totally against SMART goals. I'm for stupid goals. Let me tell you something. When they put the first man on the moon, there was nothing smart about that, right? There was an amazing, they wanted to put a man on the moon, right? There was no return on investment, or anything like that. And so for me, what I love about set absurd expectations, like we're in a society now where everybody, smart goal. And listen, there's nothing wrong with smart goals. I'm all for it. But life is a lot more about than just smart goals. You might have a stupid, what others might think is a stupid ambition or a stupid dream, but for whatever reason, it's really important for you. Historically, I've always goals and ambitions and dreams that are, realistic, or even if they're not realistic, they're very proper, if I want to use that term. And this kind of gave me permission to put some crazy ideas that I've always wanted to do that were just really, really important for me. And it was just such a fun exercise because, listen, it doesn't cost me any money to grab a pen and a piece of paper and to write these things. And when I say it's a magical experience, like, when you go to Disneyland or you're watching this amazing movie, I really love that. So that was maybe, the one part that really stood out for me was just keep listing your ambitions, keep listing your dreams. It's okay if they're crazy. And you know what? They're a gateway to your soul because for whatever reason, these are important for you. And why? I have no idea. I'm sure somebody can psychoanalyze that and dive into the details, but I found that to be incredibly, incredibly satisfying. And then what I did is I took them and I kind of put them into two categories, or several categories, I should say. But like these really big business ambitions that I wanted, and then these really crazy personal ones that I want to do, right? And the personal ones, whether I do them or not, is somewhat irrelevant, but I have them listed, right? Anyways, for me, that was a really fun experience, an exercise.
Absolutely. For me too, David. I have few other favorite ones, especially when we did the podcast. That's when I needed it. The trigger was to set absurd expectations. That was the trigger. That was like us allowing ourselves to just dream and be crazy and want something that maybe doesn't make sense, or maybe too big, or maybe silly, or basically just doesn't make sense, right? And just be like, why not? Why not? Let me just write it down and go to the next silly thing. So it was a very freeing exercise. Like I felt a lot of freedom doing that.
Yeah, and that's the one thing that if you think about, us humans and animals, that's one distinction that we have. We can dream, we can envision the future, we can build a different future in our head, and go for it. And I heard this statement. There's a really great quote, but I'm gonna say it. If you've already built something in your mind, don't consider it to be a loss, right? Anytime there's a blueprint and you print something, right? There's the actual blueprint and then you go and you build that. So when you go and you build a house, right, there's a blueprint and then you actually go and you build that house. So if you've already built that blueprint in your head, think of that as sort of, the blueprint, and then you can actually go and you can build that. And so that's just something that I wanted to share because sometimes we build things in our head, but we never execute on them. The only difference between, the blueprint in your head and, something that's in the real world is somebody executed on that. You've been thinking about these things and you've got these blueprints. Fantastic. Go and execute to see these things happen. But, the 7-part framework, I found that to be amazing. I thought it was also a lot of fun. It was also really rewarding. And for somebody like me that, sets goals on a regular basis, it came out of left field or it came unexpected. I go, oh, wow, this is really, really amazing. I found that to be a really fun exercise and I found that to be really rewarding.
Absolutely. I think it was Napoleon Hill who said everything happens twice. The first time it happens in the mind, and then it happens in reality. So that's what you were saying, David.
Napoleon Hill. That's what I was looking for.
Okay.
I couldn't remember who it was. So good job, Ruba. All right. As a listener, we've got some questions for you to ponder and think about and ask yourself. One of these questions is this: what will happen if your dreams are successful? And I ask this question because, we have this fear of failure. But in reality, is it a fear of failure, or is it really a fear of if you became wildly successful that you're afraid of, oh my goodness, what if this really does happen? And, another question to ponder and think about is what will happen or continue to happen if you don't move forward? One of the things that happens, and I shared this quote last time, potential unexpressed turns into pain. And, what will happen if you don't move forward with your big dream, with your big ambition, if you just sit on it, right? I mean, it's really fascinating because when you read the books, when you talk to people that are sort of at the end of their lifetime, they regret a lot more the things that they didn't do than the things that they actually did. And that's been something that's really been motivating for me. There was a nurse, and I can't remember the title of the book, but she wrote a book, and basically she was taking care of people that were on their deathbeds. And one of the things that she did is she would be just talking to them and asking them about, what they loved about their life, what they regretted, and things like that. And she published a book on all the details of that. We'll have to put it in the show notes because I can't remember that book. But it was really phenomenal because her whole life revolved around spending time with people that are basically at the end of their life. And hardly any of them regretted the things that they did. The vast majority of them regretted the things that they didn't do. That was one of the big things that really stood out. Another question I want you to think about is, what is your biggest fear? What do you need to do in order to overcome that fear? And that fear, we can call them that fear monster, gets bigger and bigger the more and more afraid you are and the more you don't face it. But if you take one step closer every day, that fear monster becomes really, really small. And then another question to ponder about and think about is, whose support do you need? And what I mean by that is, it could be a person, it could be a company, it could be resources, but you don't need to do everything yourself. I think we've been so accustomed, in school, trying to do everything ourselves that, when we collaborate in school, they call that cheating. And I go, I don't know. In the real world, I can call up my friends and colleagues and team members and I can get help. In school, I was never able to do that. I had to do everything myself. And that's called cheating. And so one of the things that happens is we've been ingrained in school and university and, so much after that to basically try to do everything on our own. And to me, I always try to think in terms of building a team or who else can help me, right? Hey, I know I'm really good at 1, 2, and 3, but man, I need support of other people to help me with some of these details or, to get me from here to there. Or better yet, who's somebody that's already done this that maybe wrote a book? So one of my favorite things is when people write books, I love to go and read the books that they wrote, because I'll tell you this, that person that wrote the book does not have that time to sit down with me and explain that and go over that with me. I've even found that to be true where I want to share some ideas with people. I don't have time to share these ideas. I'm a busy guy, but I have a podcast recording and I can go, hey, here's a podcast. I talk about this in a lot more detail. Go listen to that and come back to me if you have any questions. Even in my own personal life where I started doing that, which is fascinating. So whose support do you need? You don't need to do everything yourself. These are your big dreams. And the bigger your dream, the more that you want from other people to support you to get there. And what's interesting is there's a lot of people out there that would love to be part of your big dream, especially if your big dream isn't just revolving around you. And ideally, it's not just revolving around you. You're helping other people or, there's a benefit to other people in that big dream. But that's a really big insight of who else can I bring on this journey with me to accomplish the big dream, the big ambition? Because here's the deal. A lot of people would love to be part of that. There's just that creativity that's missing. And I guess, but there's a couple of other questions I want to ask, but I'll come back to you before I ask some of the other questions.
I love that last part, David, and I could definitely resonate to it because I remember before we met, I think it was like before we started the podcast, and I think it was like 2 years ago and a half. I remember I just had my son Amouri, I just delivered, and I was thinking, okay, so I want to do something. I'm just I don't want to go back to the corporate life. And then I just had this idea that okay, I wanna help someone do something big. I met 2 people. That's when I wrote my first book, and that's when I met you, and that's when we started the podcast, right? I'm thinking about it. I always remember that moment, the moment I said to myself, okay, I'm not sure about what I want to do now, but I want to help someone do something big. When you said this, a lot of people could be willing to join you in your big dream. I feel like I'm joining you in your big dream, and I'm really enjoying it. I'm enjoying the ride, and that's fine. I could have my other dreams. I'm doing my other things, but I'm doing this with you, and I'm really enjoying it. That's really a great way to think about it, that you dream big and then you would find other people who could join you to do your thing, right? You'll just end up attracting them. You will figure out a way to meet them, right? I mean, look how far you are. You're in the US and I'm here, so it's just absolutely crazy.
Yeah, well, what's amazing, and you said that, is, I'm always thinking about, hey, these are the big dreams, these are the big ambitions. Who else wants to come on the ride with me? But like you said, there are other people that have big dreams and big ambitions, and I would love to go on the ride with them. Not necessarily full time, where I drop everything and do that, but on a part-time basis, whether it's a nonprofit, whether it's X, Y, or Z, it doesn't really matter. But it's actually a lot of fun to see other people with their big dreams and their big ambitions and help them get there. So it goes back to the point that I talked about at the beginning of the session, which is, I think the problem is there's just the lack of creativity. There's a lack of imagination, because if you have enough creativity and enough imagination, there are so many people that want to sign up for that ride. And so what is your big dream? What is your big ambition? And go for it. And you'd be surprised at how many people will come along on the ride for something like that. It's pretty amazing.
And then again, I think it's really all, the spark starts when you say, like, okay, let me start dreaming. Let me give myself the permission to dream big. Let me just imagine that I've done it already. What would that be? And then for me, it is something like, when I went through this exercise, I saw myself after I've done the dream, and I saw myself now, for example, and I looked at both of them and I'm like, okay, so which one do I like more? What do I want to do? So you kind of like really have to push yourself through it. And that is absolutely one of the reasons that I love this framework, because it's easy, but it's deep. So you really have to face yourself so many times and really be in a dialogue and ask yourself those deep questions. One of the toughest questions is, what is your biggest fear? And I talked to you before about asking the why in like multiple layers. So I was recently listening to Dean Graziosi, and he was talking about the why to find your purpose, right? You're doing something, so you keep on asking yourself, why am I doing this? 7 times, right? So it's as if you're peeling off, let's say, an onion, right? So you're peeling it off. You go layer after layer until you really reach the core. And once you are on step number 7, it just transforms you, because then the answer comes from your heart. And once you reach that level, then you are absolutely sure that you want to do this, and you have that reason. And to be honest with you, David, the first time that I heard someone saying about it, the guy was saying that his why was to be in control of his life. And I judged him. I said, like, what? Be in control of his life? That doesn't make sense. That's your why. And then I said, okay, let me not judge myself, right? So when I did it, I also had kind of like a silly why, but it made a lot of sense to me. It made a lot of sense to me, and I didn't judge myself on that. So I would encourage everyone to go through the exercise, figure out your why, figure out your biggest fear. And it is tough. It's not going to be easy, because you're going to think about your fears, and you're going to put yourself in some dark places, and you're going to imagine stuff. But you will learn more about yourself, because we often don't have much time to face ourselves and to understand it, right? We're so busy looking at the external world that we're not really looking deeply and looking at like some dark places. I mean, who wants to think about their fear? That's not a nice conversation.
Yeah, and maybe I'll hit the same thing that you asked, from maybe a different angle, which is, hey, it's really fascinating when you talk to little kids, little boys and girls. They're always asking why? Yeah. And it's a curiosity. And sometimes I think as we get older, we become too judgmental. And one of the things that, like you, I've trained myself, and I'm there's still plenty of room for improvement, is to stop judging people, right? A lot of times I'll ask why, and I'm totally curious. My wife harasses me and says, sometimes they're like a 10-year-old. But like I meet people and, I'll see things and I'll keep asking why. And it's not like I'm trying to judge. I'm actually really curious. And I think when you're asking why with the spirit of curiosity, like a little kid, like a little boy, little girl, it's really fascinating. So think about it that way, when we ask these questions. And I guess the two questions that I want to leave with you before I talk about one of these concepts that I think you'll find to help you is question number one is, what will you do with your one extraordinary life? This is a really great question. Life is a limited time offer. We only have so much time on this earth. What are you going to do with your one exceptional life? What are you going to do with your one extraordinary life? It's your life. It's up to you. It's your book. You get to write the chapters. Whatever is behind you are chapters that you've already done. What do you want the future chapters to be? You may not be able to control the previous chapters, but you can control your destiny. You can go in and you can paint a framework for what you want the upcoming chapters to be. And I guess the other question that I want to share with you is, what needs to happen to land your plane so you can bring your big dreams, your big ambitions to reality? So it's no longer just things that are in your head that, that are actually real, that they're out there, that they're in the real world. So again, these are questions, we're pondering and we're asking. And it's, for me to ask myself, it's for you to ask yourself. And if you need to, you can pause the program, you can pause this session, and you can start thinking about these questions and you can ask that. I can tell you, many times I'm driving and I'll be listening and, a question really hits me and I pull over, I'll stop and I'll start thinking about that. And then I'll just take out my iPad and I'll start taking notes because that question has had a really big impact. I also do the same thing when I'm running. I'll be listening to something while I'm running and it's just something really powerful. So I'll stop and on my iPhone, I'll start taking notes. So it's totally okay for you to do that. These are flashes of insight that you don't want to lose. And these are great questions to ask yourself. I guess I'll come back to you before I talk about a strategy that I think will help the listener. Should I keep going or did you want to add something?
Yeah, I just wanted to add my personal experience with one of these questions. What will you do with your one extraordinary life? At the beginning, it feels as if there is a wall in front of you and you're just here in this place with your limitations, with your environment, with the way you're raised up, with your mindset. You're just here and there might be a wall towards your big dream, right? You're just totally blocked from it. But as you go through the exercises, you start to allow yourself to just think and to be free in your mind because nobody's judging you. You're not judging yourself. You might as well dream about something absolutely big and absolutely hilarious and doesn't make sense to anyone and you're just absolutely okay with it. So as you do this, you start to go through this wall and then you discover that it's not a wall, it's just a glass that you knock on it and it can just break. So it is as transformational as this. For me, this was my personal experience. That's why I think the 7 steps and those deep questions just make you realize that you're not really in front of a wall and nothing is final, right? This is not final. You can still change it. And the way to change it is by asking these questions and triggering the answers. Just allow yourself to go through the exercise.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Ruba. And so a strategy that I want to share with you. So, when we talk about landing the plane, maybe I want to go back to that analogy. Maybe you're flying the plane and something happens, the engines go out or, there's some major difficulty in life or, something like that. For those of you that are pilots or know anything about flying, there's this concept that they teach you, which is pitch, pick, and point. And basically what that is let's just pretend that your engines ran out, your engines stopped working, and they actually train you on this. And for the record, I did not do this. I think if I did it, I might freak out and lose it. But basically the instructor turns off the engines on the plane and trains you. So now natural reaction is to try to pull the yoke so that the plane goes up, right? And what you're trying to do now is trying to get the plane to go up, but you don't have the engines. And actually you're supposed to do quite the opposite, which is pitch the plane to where you want to land, pick a place that you want to land and point there and then just go there. It's hard to see this, but if you type in this term in Google search, you'll know what I'm talking about. Pitch, pick, and point. And the whole idea is your engines are out on the plane. You hit some kind of a major event. So what you do is you put the plane in the pitch like you're going to go down. You pick where you want to land and then you point there and then you go there. And so the whole idea is as you're living your life and when you hit some major events and things are not going according to plan and you're not able to take that plane fully from Dubai to London, what you want to do is you want to look, and basically, if you don't point to a specific place to land, you're going to probably land anywhere. So this way you point to a field, you point to a road, and you go and you land there. And it's the same thing with your life. If things don't go as planned, you hit some major events, you say, okay, well, at least let me pick where I want to land and let me go there, even during an emergency. So that's kind of a strategy that I wanted to share, that, yes, I know that not, everything is going to go 100% according to plan, but if there's a major event, that's just something that I wanted to share with you. And then I guess before we conclude, I just want to share some quotes that I want to leave with you, because these are really instrumental.
So this pitch, pick, and point, is it kind of like a damage control?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so you can't really reach your target and you go like,
Yes.
so where can I land?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
gotcha.
Thank you. That's exactly what it is. It's basically saying you're flying your plane and your engine stopped working for whatever reason, right? You still have an option on what to do, or you could just sort of let, life do whatever it wants. What we're trying to do with this whole Your Big Dream is to avoid being that piece of wood that's just drifting in the ocean aimlessly, right? Where are you trying to go? Let's get you there. So,
Right.
yeah, but it's really that pitch, pick, and point is really all about damage control when you've got major events like that happen. So the quotes that I want to share with the listener, and then Ruba, I'll come back to you. I have a lot of favorite quotes, but I'm going to probably share like 4 or 5 of them with the listener, because it really brings home this whole season, Your Big Dream season. Here's the first quote by Mark Twain. 20 years from now, you will be more disappointed by the things you didn't do than by the ones you did. So throw off the bowlines, sail away from the safe harbor, catch the trade winds in your sails, explore, dream, discover.
Yeah.
And I really like this, because this is really talking about 20 years from now. You're going to regret the things that you didn't do more than the things that you actually did. Because if you did them and they didn't succeed, at least you know that. But if you didn't know that, if you don't do them, you have no idea. What if this thing worked out? What if that thing worked out? The other quote that I want to share with the listener is by Christopher Reeve. So many of our dreams at first seem impossible, then they seem improbable, and then when we summon up the will, they soon become inevitable. And this is a quote by Christopher Reeves. And I really like that, because you start out kind of like what you talked about. You think there's this big wall, right? It seems like it's impossible. And then you work on it and it seems improbable. It doesn't seem like, wow, I'm trying to get to the moon. And then when you summon up all the will, it becomes inevitable. There's no stopping you. And it's really interesting, because you're going through all those phases. And that third phase is where you shatter this glass and you go right through it and you say, this is nothing. So that's another quote that I like. It's kind of describing the stages of what you go through to get to your big dream, right? And then Malcolm Forbes has a really good one. When you cease to dream, you cease to live. Actually, I don't have this one written here, but there's one by Albert Einstein. I forget exactly what it is, but it's like science will get you from A to Z, but imagination will get you everywhere. And I'm not quoting it right, but it's a phenomenal one, because he's really talking about using your imagination will get you anywhere you want in life. And then my last one, and I think this is by Mahmoud Darwish. We should say, this whole framework is something by Bob Goff in his book, Dream Big. And so we've taken that framework and, we've expanded on what these 7 steps, and we've done that. And even though Mahmoud Darwish and Bob Goff probably don't know each other and lived in other parts of the world, it's really amazing, because it's almost like they have the same mindset, right? Mahmoud Darwish is a Palestinian that died in Houston of heart complications. But he lived his whole life either in exile or in Palestine. That's Mahmoud Darwish. And then Bob Goff lived his whole life in California. So they don't know each other, totally separated, but they have so much of the same mindsets, and it's amazing. I would say that they're probably cousins or, brothers, and they don't know it. But the quote by Mahmoud Darwish, which is I shared, is, the earth will expand in accordance to the size of your dreams. على قدر حلمك تتسع الأرض. That's really what this is all about. How big is your dream? The earth has room for that. The challenge is, we don't have a motivation problem. We don't have an ambition problem. We have a problem where we're not creative. We're not dreaming big, because if you dream big, you can accomplish those things and you can execute on that. And this was kind of the framework that we shared with the listener, is where you go to, the 7-part framework. I don't want to repeat all of that again. But those are the 7 parts. And today we talked about the last framework, which is land the plane. And if you haven't done so, go to our website at riadi.me, riadi.me, and you can get a little bit more information about that. And with that, Ruba, I'll turn it over to you if there's anything else you want to add, and then we can go ahead and conclude.
I absolutely love the quotes, David. I absolutely love them. And I just want to add that the problem is life is difficult, right? And there are so many challenges in life, and we're busy. We're busy with our ordinary tasks and with having maybe family and running a business and have other responsibilities. So it is hard to break from all that and separate yourself and start dreaming, because dreaming just seems unrealistic. It doesn't bring direct profits. Seems like a waste of time. It's just is something difficult to do in the middle of everything happening in life. But you have to work on it, because if you don't work on it, if you don't get through that, if you don't break through it, if you don't recognize that life is kind of like a simulator as well, so you push it and it goes through the direction that you're pushing. So if you stand where you are, you're not going anywhere. You might as well be going backwards. So I think this is just really important to invest in yourself. Take a minute or two to stand with yourself and dream and think about it, because it will never happen that you will have some time to dream. It's not like life is going to give you some time to dream, or someone is going to tell you, okay, now stop everything, go and dream and come back. This is not happening, right? You have to do it yourself. Otherwise, no one is going to do it for you.
Yeah. And Ruba, we're going to conclude this season of Your Big Dream, which is the 7 parts we had talked about. I'm going to encourage you as a listener to go back and listen to all 7 parts and make time for yourself and your dreams. And if you're anything like us, if you're anything like me, I'll be more specific. You make time for everybody else in your life, but you don't make enough time for yourself and for your big dreams and your big ambitions. So if you're making time for your family, if you're making time for your friends, if you're making time for your work, why aren't you making time for yourself, for your big dreams and your big ambitions? This is really important. You want to prioritize that. You want to go ahead and do that. And so let me ask you again, what will you do with your one extraordinary life? What are you going to do with your one exceptional life? Life is a limited time offer. And as I said, I don't think we have an ambition problem. I don't think we have a we can't do it problem. I don't think we have a motivation problem. I really think we have a lack of creative dreaming problem. And I'll leave you with this quote again by Mahmoud Darwish. I know I've said it a couple of times, but this quote really resembles what this whole season's all about. My hope is by the end of the session, you have this quote memorized and you can repeat it. The earth will expand in accordance to the size of your dreams, by Mahmoud Darwish.
Thank you, David. I mean, I feel like I finally get this quote, David. We had to repeat it so many times to get it. My last thought is, sometimes dreams are tricky and you don't really realize that you have a big dream unless you start dreaming it, because sometimes it feels silly and it feels stupid and it feels unnecessary. So how to know that you have a big dream? How to know that it's important to you? It will keep on coming back. You will still think about it. Situations will happen that will trigger it for you. You'll realize that you just have this idea at the back of your head that keeps on popping up, maybe sometimes uninvited, just keeps on popping up, and maybe it doesn't make any sense at the moment, but you have to pursue it because this might be the dream that you need to expand. And then it becomes your big dream as you expand it, as you work on it, and as you step into it. With that, we thank you for listening to this program. David, do you want to add something? I know you always have something to add.
I think this is a great time. I want to thank the listener for being with us on the 7-part series. And again, if you haven't and you listened someplace in the middle, go back and listen to part 1 through part 7. I think you'll find that really helpful. I read a lot, I listen a lot, and this has had a really big impact on me personally. And so I encourage you to go and listen to the 7-part series and do that. I think you're going to find that transformational. I think you're also going to find that to be a lot of fun and you're going to enjoy it. And really, it's all about you. It's not about me. It's not about Ruba. It's not about anybody else. It's really about you, your dreams, and your ambitions. and stating what they are and thinking creatively about that, and then saying, great, let me go ahead and land the plane, right? We're using that analogy today where we talked about landing the plane. You can do everything right, but then you want to land that plane so you can arrive at where your big dreams and your big ambitions are. And as I said, one of the things that this will really help you with is all of a sudden, we got older in life and we took life seriously, and our big dream and our big ambition has become a whisper. This 7-part series really helps you take that whisper that you no longer hear so that you can live life where you're waking up and you're excited, rather than being a dead man walking or, a dead woman walking, where you're living life like a zombie. Imagine that you wake up and you've got these crazy dreams and you've got these crazy ambitions. Some are big, some are small, some are funny, some are ridiculous, some are serious. But you wake up every single day and you're pursuing those. And you're no longer wandering like that piece of wood aimlessly in the water where the waves of life are taking you wherever you want. This is being really intentional. This is really being about your dreams, your ambitions, your goals, where you want to go in life, and going there. And this is what this framework is all about. So I just wanted to share that with the listener, because there's a pandemic of so many of us out there that are just, we're dead, but we're alive. And we wake up every day and we're just zombies and we're not really living life to the max. And this is really a great way for you to go in and say, man, you know what? Forget this and forget that. These are really important things for me. These are my dreams. These are my ambitions. These are big. These are whimsical. These are stupid. These are silly. It doesn't really matter. It's really all about you and living your life. And some might be really expensive and some might be really cheap and everything in between. It doesn't matter. But the whole goal, by going through the 7-part framework, is for you to go back and get in touch with your big dreams, so it's no longer a whisper that you no longer hear, so that you can go and you can pursue that. So you can wake up every single day and be driven and be ambitious and have something meaningful that you're working towards.
That was so elegant. I'm not going to try to comment it. It was so real. It was so elegant. Like, wow. Yeah. So don't forget, you have something in this world. So rise up.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Riyadi Club podcast. And remember, you have something in this world. So rise up. If you want us to cover a specific topic, or if you'd like to be a guest on our podcast, go to www.riyadi.me. That's RIADI.me. Thank you and have a great day.